Welcome to Loftside Bantr. You can find all of our information at our website, www.loftsidebanter.com. That's loftsideBantr.com. Email loftsidebanter@gmail.com. We got quite a few new things in the works for this show, and very excited about all of it. On today's episode, we're going to talk to Massachusetts Pirates owner, founder, and general manager Jawad Yatim. We're going to go over some baseball news and talk about some new techniques that have kind of come into the game, some things about base running. We'll talk about torpedo bats. We'll look at the National Basketball Association with the Pacers stealing Game 1 of the NBA Finals from the Thunder on a last-second shot. The NHL playoffs, Panthers and Oilers are tied 1-1. Brad Marchand putting his stamp on this series already. And then we'll kind of dive back into coaches and what they have to do to keep their job. We had mentioned it in episodes before. A firing happened in the world of soccer that is quite puzzling to myself. And then we'll look at some local stuff. The Boston Bruins hire a new head coach in Mao Sturm. With all that, please go to the website. Please go and email and take a look at some previous episodes. We had ones where we talked top 5 lists for Disney. We have some coffee conversations in there. Previous interviews with the Massachusetts Pirates. So please go ahead and take a look at all of those. Available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and YouTube. With that, let's go right into the countdown.
We are on in 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2.
Welcome into Loftside Bantr. As mentioned in the opening, we have a great interview with Jawad Yatim, the founder, owner, and general manager of the Massachusetts Pirates, and we'll get to that a little bit later, as well as some news from around the sporting world. We have some exciting things happening with the show, and one of the things I want to start off in mentioning is we're going to kind of look at the format of this show a little bit. We're going to look at it and try to do some segments going forward. So I'm looking for suggestions from the listeners for different segments. I'm looking at one that would be kind of like a spotlight kind of segment where we look at either a sports-related thing or a non-sports-related, and we really hone in on that subject and get some opinions about it and everything else like that. We really want to see not just sports-wise, but everyday life subjects, that the difference of opinions from different people. Those things fascinate me. The things that fascinate me about people is what makes them tick, what goes through their mind, and how we can all look at the same subject and have different takes on it. And good or bad. I mean, I'm not going to agree with everybody. I'm not going to obviously have the same thought process, which is interesting because, two eyes can see something completely different, or two sets of eyes, I should say. So that's something we're going to look into going forward. We won't do one in this episode, but we will eventually put that in the show. So I'm looking for a segment name. I'm looking for a segment sponsor, and I'm looking for the different segments that people do want to hear, or the different subjects people want to hear. We'll start off with the Stanley Cup Finals, NBA Finals, and then we'll go into that interview with Jawad, and then we'll look at the kind of local stuff with the Bruins, and we'll talk about the coaches again, as we all mentioned in the opening. The Stanley Cup Finals are one game apiece. Oilers won Game 1 in overtime. Panthers won Game 2 in overtime. It shows that the finesse of the Oilers, as we mentioned in our preview, has been able to kind of go through and run through the Panthers' kind of physicality and hard-hittingness that team kind of provides. Now, with both games going to overtime, it has shown that there's really not a ton separating the two teams, which is interesting because normally those two different styles, one kind of overtakes the other, and there's still time to do that in this series. But pretty high-scoring affair. Last Wednesday for Game 1, Oilers won in overtime 4-3. Last Friday, the 6th, is when Game 2 happened. Again, both of these games in Edmonton. Panthers come out on top 5-4 in overtime. So there's goals to be scored, which is interesting because Sergei Bobrovsky, the goaltender for the Panthers, looked really good and wasn't giving up a ton of goals within the playoffs. And we know that the Oilers had Stuart Skinner, who could either give up a ton of goals and save nothing or save everything and shut out the game. So, to see him kind of give up a couple of goals like that is not out of the norm. So if the Oilers are getting to Bobrovsky, then we're going to have a very interesting series. If Bobrovsky can find his form and start shutting out, McDavid, Draisaitl, all of them, then, the Panthers should win this series. But it's been pretty even all across the board, which has made it even more entertaining to watch. Game 3 is on Monday, and it shifts over to Sunshine, Florida, for the Panthers' first home game. So now with it being 1-1, if the Panthers can take the next 2 games at home, the Oilers may be in some trouble. That outside of last year, where they really came back down 3 games, and again, they have the absolute ability to score 1 billion goals a game because of the offense and the talent they have in that front line. They're very top heavy with that offense. It's the ability to keep the puck out of the net that may be that problem. Because where I mentioned the Oilers have all this offensive talent, it's not like the Panthers don't. The Panthers have a ton of offensive talent. And in Game 2, we saw Brad Marchand, a very familiar name for this Bruins community, with 2 goals, including the game winner. So this team has the ability to put up just as many goals as the Oilers, and they also have the ability to stop the puck from going in the net, which has been kind of weird because in Game 2, they gave up 3 goals in the first period. In Game 1, I believe they gave up a goal in every period, which is out of the norm right now for the Panthers. But that being said, series is 1-1. It's exciting. It's fun to see the same 2 teams go back at it again. It kind of builds that rivalry a little bit of 2 teams that don't play each other that much, kind of like a Celtics-Lakers kind of matchup. But this is the Florida Panthers, which, again, shouldn't be a hockey hub and probably isn't in the upper echelon of fanfare considering all the other colder markets that love hockey. Including all the Canadian teams, Boston, New York, all those different areas. But because they went through so much rebuilding for a long time, and they've put together an excellent roster, you see a good turnout for all these games. But again, Florida doesn't ever yell out to you as a hockey hub, but it has been the last few years. And then you have the Canadian team, Edmonton. Canada has not had a Stanley Cup champion in a very long time. So it's not just Edmonton that's rooting for this. Unless you're a diehard against the Edmonton Oilers, all of that country is rooting for Edmonton to win this cup. As the creators of the sport and everything else like that, the Canadians really, really want to have a Stanley Cup champion again. And Edmonton's had the best chance, obviously, the last 2 years. They're just built in a weird way because they're so top-heavy with Draisaitl, McDavid. They do have Evan Bouchard, who's the defenseman, top-line defenseman, I should say, and he's been very, very good, at least at the start of these playoffs, or the start of the Stanley Cup playoffs as well. NBA Finals-wise, I was banging on the drum for the Thunder. I was saying how dangerous of a team they are, and I want to not take away from that. They're still a very dangerous team and still very much could win the series because it's only been 1 game. Game 2 is tonight. This is being recorded in the morning of the day of Game 2, so just so the time reference works for the future listeners. The Pacers stole Game 1, and that's what they've been able to do in these playoffs, is keep things close a lot of the time. If they're not blowing people out or they're not whatever, they're keeping games close and giving themselves a chance at the end of the game. They led in this game for 0.3 seconds. I didn't make that up. I didn't stutter on that. 0.3 seconds is the amount of time that they led. That is the definition of stealing a game. And when you're stealing a game in the NBA Finals, it's huge. SGA outplayed Halliburton for 47 minutes and 40 seconds. So literally the entire game. SGA had 38 points for the night. The Thunder forced 24 turnovers from Indiana, which is an uncharacteristic amount of turnovers for a team that takes care of the ball as well as Indiana does. The only thing that kept the Pacers in this game was hitting 18 three-pointers, including 6 of 10 in the fourth quarter. The Thunder, which they're prone to do, missed more than they made. I believe they were 11 for 30 for the game. So this allowed Indiana to stay in this game and be able to make the plays at the end of the game to get the win. Here's the problem, especially in the NBA playoffs, with teams that give up on big leads. And I believe they were up by 14 or 15 at one point in time. Actually, it was 15 points in the fourth quarter. With that, we're going to kick it over to ourselves and get into the interview with the Massachusetts Pirates founder, owner, GM, Jawad Yatim. Welcome back here to Loftside Banter, and we have a very special guest, somebody I've been dying to talk to, the founder, owner, and general manager of your Massachusetts Pirates, Jawad Yatim. Jawad, how are you today?
Hey, I'm doing well. Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it. I look forward to, chopping it up with you and then talking a little bit about, Pirates football and then what we got going on over here.
Perfect. That's what everybody wants to hear about. So why don't we kind of go all the way kind of back to the beginning and really figure out, so why indoor football? What was the whole thought behind that?
Following college, I ended up playing a couple seasons of arena football, and that's kind of where I guess the gears started grinding, in my head a little bit about possibly bringing a team home. At the time there was no team in New England, so figured maybe why don't we bring up the product back to Massachusetts and kind of see how it goes, and pretty much 8 years later we're still here. So. It's been a great experience. It's been a lot of work. Glad to have done it, and hopefully we can continue winning and put together a little run here to cap off the season.
Now, for those who don't know, which is the majority of us, I'm assuming, what's the biggest challenge of launching a professional football team from basically scratch?
It's certainly not the football. The football aspect of it all. That's kind of the enjoyable part. That's where the passion really kicks into play. And then that's kind of our bread and butter, so to speak. But it's more so just building a fan base. The logistics of running an operation of a professional sports organization. And then doing it more so in the Boston media market. Obviously, it's a little more competitive out here than some other markets. So, just really the logistics, the operation behind it all, and then trying to, just do as best you can from a business standpoint, from a profit loss standpoint, and put together the best product that you can out there. And the toughest thing was, we're in a market that hasn't, it doesn't have any history with the game. So, we're kind of the pioneers of arena football and in this area. At least a product that is sustained over time. There have been teams that have kind of come and gone after a year, whatnot, but, kind of developing the history with the game, within the market is a challenge. Some other markets have had it since, late 80s, early 90s. So, it's a lot easier of a pitch in those type of places. There's a lot more familiarity with the game, but, Massachusetts, we were pretty much starting from a clean slate. And, just kind of developing that history, not just with the game, but with the organization and logistically getting it to a point where, it's kind of routine now. And because there was a lot of learning. I mean, I was 27 years old when I started the Pirates. So, obviously with no prior experience of running an organization or starting one from scratch, I was playing before. So, it was all new. It was a lot of learning on the go and just working as hard as you possibly can.
So you mentioned obviously you have some background playing the game. How did that shape your vision as an owner?
I just kind of visioned it, in regard to like, what would I want, what would I want, my players to have? Like, what kind of organization would I want to be a part of? Um, that kind of, I guess laid the foundation for what type of organization I wanted to have. But yeah, I kind of put myself in the player's seat and then also put myself in a fan seat as well. And that kind of, shaped how, we wanted the experience to be in the arena and on television. And then, from a player standpoint, just, where would I want to play? What would I want that to be like? And then, try to do our best within the market that we're in, to kind of replicate, what I would want on both ends of it.
So the fact that interests me or I'm really into is being that general manager and being able to shape your roster and your coaching staff and stuff like that. How do you balance all of those things of being a general manager and an owner?
I mean, it's now it's easier than it was obviously in the first couple of years. But I've worked my ass off, and I'm not afraid to say that. We've really dedicated myself to the Pirates, and at the end of the day, I'm in my own backyard. I'm from Massachusetts, so if I'm going to have a team in the area, and I'm going to be representing my family and doing it in my backyard, I'm going to do everything I possibly can to put to put the best product out there. From a player personnel standpoint, the beginning years, the early years, it was a lot of selling, it was a lot of pitching. Guys weren't really familiar with the organization or the brand or the culture. Over time, as you do a lot of winning and guys are getting opportunities elsewhere, it definitely gets easier. Word of mouth starts to spread. Players obviously, have their friends that are currently playing in the game, and guys talk, within the player market. So, and at the end of the day, good players want to play with good players. So, we've done a good job of just getting a good group of guys in here year in, year out. We've yielded some good results, and now players want to be a part of that. They know that if they come here and they do well, they have a legitimate shot to get back to where they want to be at. And yeah, so but it's taken a lot of work. Obviously it's more than just watching film and saying, hey, that player is pretty good. There's a lot of trial and error just in terms of guys actually wanting to play arena football. Not everybody is into it. And then just yeah, the whole process itself is kind of lengthy. Just really taking a different transactional list, whether it's the NFL and draft free agency list, CFL transactions list, UFL transactions list. Those are the three, main lists that I generally attack, and then identifying who's a free agent, who's not. You might reach out to 500 people and you might only hear back from 40 or 50 of them, and then from there you kind of really start to constrict your lists, and then they continuously get smaller just by, the communication you have with the players and their interest in playing for you and just their fit within the organization, everything like that. So yeah, it's a process, but you gotta love it. You gotta love it, and every year the rent's due. So just because you did well the year before doesn't mean anything. When it comes to the following year. So and yeah, so it's a never ending process for sure.
So it's not like Madden where you just go on and click on a player's name and offer them fictitious money and stuff like that, right?
Yeah, no. Unfortunately, we don't have auto drafts in the IFL. So, you got to actually go out there, and then it's just so much communicating, and and back and forth and everything like that, even with agents. So I mean, and obviously the off season is a lot different from in season. Just the tempo of the transactions themselves. Even just like this week, I mean, just having to, bring in specific positions, but get them in by a certain date, to where they can get some practice reps before, we obviously go and play this weekend.
Mm-hmm.
As opposed to the off season where you can kind of talk to somebody, give them a couple weeks to think about it, and then kind of make your moves from there. But it's in season and off season are two different worlds when it comes to transactions.
Right.
So yeah, it's a chess match. It's even rosters designations and everything like that. Just kind of being creative with your team and finding ways to open up spots. To get somebody in that that you really want to get a look at. Even though you might not necessarily need that person at that time, but it's certainly a chess match, and over time you get better at it. You get more comfortable with it. And yeah, it's been a hell of an experience.
What do you look for what are you looking for in players? Maybe not just athletically, but personally, and what kind of culture are you looking to set with this organization?
I mean, the most important thing for me is I mean, I always preach, being the most competitive team in the league. I'm looking for competitors. I'm looking for guys that are enthusiastic about the game. At the end of the day, these guys don't make a ton of money. And then they're really playing for the love of it. They're playing to chase their dream. And everybody's excited once they get here. The training camp, the first few weeks of the season, everybody's jacked up. They're happy to be back playing. The off season can get kind of redundant and long. But that enthusiasm really, kicks in. That you really need that enthusiasm once you hit week 12, week 13, week 14. You're seeing the same people. You're doing the same thing every day, eating the same damn food. And just it can get redundant, obviously, once you're in the routine. But just having the enthusiasm to kind of fight through that, and then stay excited about being here and being a part of the process. Throughout a long season, it's a long season. It's
Mm-hmm.
full 16 game season, but at the end of the day, you have 3 bye weeks on top of that, and then the playoffs. So it's 20 plus weeks. So you need guys that really care about their what they're doing, and then really care about where they're trying to go, and then really care about the organization. Otherwise, you have guys fluttering out by mid-season. Guys kind of starting to check out, and that's obviously not what you want. So for me, just being extremely competitive and being extremely enthusiastic, and then obviously, without saying, have the ability that we're looking for. The specific frame depending on position, and and obviously experience within the game as well is always it's obviously an added bonus. Just because it is a different game, the timing's different. The rules are different. Just kind of the different schematic changes that occur from the outdoor and indoor game, but then also the techniques. And so having experience does pay off for sure in this game. But yeah, I mean and it also depends on kind of the timing, right? I mean, if I need to bring in a guy on a Wednesday and we play on a Saturday, and I have the flexibility to bring in somebody who's a vet, maybe have some experience in the game, it might make more sense to do that than to bring in a young kid who's never done it before. Or, in the off season when you go into camp, you might be more open to bringing a larger group of guys that are more inexperienced because, they got time to learn the game a little bit. We're not forced to play a game in 2-3 days, stuff like that. So, um, I'm just kind of yapping on, but just to pretty much, just pretty much speaking what's coming to my mind right now. So
Right. I mean, again, it must be a lot. It must be, looking for the right fits and everything else like that. And then, as you said, going through hundreds of guys that you may not get, responses from or whatever the case may be. So, I mean, I'm sure it's a ton. And, what do you think the biggest misconception is when a player comes in to this league, comparative to, playing in Canada or playing for the NFL or anything else like that?
I mean, like from a player perspective, like what are
Yeah.
they most surprised with coming here?
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of guys might think it's kind of easy, because they're coming from a lot of our guys come, from major Division 1, universities, almost everybody has gotten an opportunity in the NFL, or they're coming from the UFL, or, and they might come in thinking, it might, the game might not be, up to par to what they think, but they quickly realize that, this is difficult. It's hard to play in this league. It's hard to win in this league. It's very hard to win in this league. It's very competitive. But then also, like, just obviously adjusting to the game itself, the timing, obviously the field dimensions, the different schematics, and obviously learning a new playbook, and just being in a new environment, playing a new game for the first time. So, all those things. But, the misconception is that, some guys do come in and think, so to speak, they think shit is sweet, and then,
Right.
a lot of guys get humbled pretty quickly. So, I would say that's probably a misconception that we see, pretty often.
What would you say a mistake or a misstep you've learned during this journey of kind of creating this whole organization?
Oh man, shit. It's been a decent amount. It's been a decent amount. Especially early on. From a financial standpoint, there is trial and error involved. Just kind of, as time goes, you kind of understand, how to spend your money in an efficient manner. That always, that's, you just continuously learn. But, obviously changing markets too. Every market is different. So like every market has their challenges. Every market has their, pros and cons, and just learning how to navigate within that market. And, that's always a challenge. And there's a lot of trial and error attached to that as well. From a football standpoint, from a personnel standpoint, I guess, there's always just, I guess, learning when to move on from somebody, when to continue to give somebody a chance. There's always kind of a push-pull there, and I think every guy's in a different situation. But, we're dealing with professionals, we're dealing with older guys, so kind of understanding that sometimes guys are what they are, and then sometimes you got to move on from different situations. But, that's always, that can also be kind of a gut feeling type of situation as well. And then that's kind of the beauty of the game. It's always a chess match, and then there's guys that, we thought we should have let go, but we didn't, and they ended up, doing pretty well for us. And then there's guys that we hung on to that, we kind of wish we had let go a little earlier. But, that's just part of the game, But yeah, I would say that's my best answer for you, boss.
Hey, that all works for me. I mean, it must be going into something where, again, you mentioned you were 27, kind of when you did all this, that there were going to be things that popped up. You're like, well, I probably didn't think of that. It happens all the time, even just with a podcast. So, I mean, I can only imagine.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yeah, I mean, anything you do in life, it's a never ending learning process,
Right.
So, no different here with the Pirates.
What's something fans might not realize about the business side of running a team?
I mean, it's it's not always a good business, I mean, you're really doing it because you love it, at the end of the day, and it's no different in major league sports. I mean, you'd be surprised how many major league, organizations lose money on a year in and year out basis, so it's not just, kind of the minor league organizations, it's sports is a, not always a lucrative business. I mean, obviously if you're in the NFL, it's great, but I mean, I'm pretty sure that, last year when the Celtics won the championship, they ended up losing. I think I mean, I don't want to, misquote it, but I know they lost money, last year and they won the championship. So,
Right.
Just in terms of not being aware of, maybe, it's not always a great business. I mean, it's really a business that, thrives on valuations and just building, value over time, so
Right.
you just do your best to sustain, so from a business standpoint, I would say, that's maybe not something people always think about.
Right. How has the IFL changed since the Pirates joined?
Oh, it's grown tremendously. I mean, I know our first season was 2021. I believe the year before that, I mean, the last, obviously we had COVID in between, but I think the season prior they were a 7-8 team league, maybe 6 teams.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and then in 2021, I think we were up to damn near 14. You know, and then now, you know, we're at 16. You know, but the ownership groups are just so much stronger these days. The vetting process with the league is a lot more tighter in terms of, you know, ownership acceptance and, you know, being granted memberships within the league. So, um, you know, it's grown tremendously. I mean, there's a lot of exciting things on the horizon just in terms of, you know, media deal rights and, you know, different partnerships within the league and just some of the neat things the league is doing and then also expansion at the same time. So, you know, I mean, I'll leave the league to speak on that, you know, from a league level, but you know, it's just grown, you know, certainly from just an expansion standpoint, but also the quality of ownership groups in the league. It's you know, it's just you know by far the cream of the crop in arena football, and you know, and the league has done a great job of just you know growing, but also strengthening at the same time.
Is there anything that you'd like to see change or evolve within the league?
You know, I mean, you know, just a few more East Coast teams wouldn't be bad. You know, kind of. You know, I mean, we what last year was our first year, and what 4 years that we played 4 or 5 years that we played an away game in our own time zone. You
Yeah.
know, so and that's something that you know is you know when I think about what we've done, it's you know it's people don't really think about how much you know we travel more than anybody. You know, and you know that over a course of a season, that could take a toll on you.
Right.
You know, where some teams are really you know they got you know these short bus rides you know for the majority of the year. You know, we're flying everywhere. You know, and yeah, I mean, we're not flying, you know, charter. You know, we're not flying like the Patriots do. So, you know, it's yeah, maybe some East Coast teams, but no, I mean, I think the league is doing a great job. You know, I got no, you know, no issues with the league, man. We love being in the league, and anything league related, I'll kind of let the league handle it.
Um, so you got back to winning ways this past week against the Sharks. What do you see for the rest of the season coming up?
You know, we're hoping we turn the corner. You know, I mean, I think we got the guys here. You know, it's been kind of you know, it was a tough situation early on, you know, kind of with the coaching staff, you know, the head coach, you know, I think decided to change career paths. At least that's what, you know, we were told, you know, as training camp started. And
Right.
obviously that kind of throws a wrench in your plans a little bit. And the offensive coordinator, you know, decides that he wants to be a little closer to home 4 days before opening night. So, you know, between those two things that, you know, obviously kind of, you know, put us in a bind a little bit going into the season. So, and obviously you want to start fast, but you know, I mean, we had to make adjustments to the coaching staff, and we did that. You know, and I think we're starting to settle in now. You know, and I think guys are, you know, the players are starting to pick up. You know, what the coaches are putting down, and then starting to buy in and starting to get a little more comfortable with the schemes and what our coach staff is trying to do. So, you know, I'm hoping we turn the corner. Um, you know, but it's really a 1 week season. The only thing we're focused on is fishing this weekend, and that's how it's got to be. You know, for us, just being in the situation we're in, you know, we can't think ahead. We really, you know, got to appreciate every single game that we have in front of us. You know, and just truly focus on you know, just doing our jobs. You know, each you know each upcoming weekend. You know, because every game just means that much more now. So, you know, not much more room for error. But you know, we've been a team that has gone on runs before. I mean, you know, we still hold the longest winning streak since we joined the league at 14 games. We've had multiple 10 plus game winning streaks at home. We've had, you know, another 7 game win streak with 6 game win streak. I mean, you know, we've gone on rolls before. So, you know, I think we just, you know, kind of got to hit our stride and start peaking and then kind of just ride that wave, you know, but our main focus right now is just going out and beating Fishers on Saturday.
Yeah, so the game's in Fishers, Indiana, Saturday, June 7th at 7 p.m. And then are you staying out there to head to Iowa?
No, we're bringing it on back. Bringing it on back. I mean, we did our West Coast trip earlier this year, but we
Yeah.
you know, stayed in Arizona for a couple weeks. But I mean, it's pretty easy flight, you know, to Indianapolis, and then it's not too bad going out to Des Moines. So, you know, we're gonna bring it on back home on Sunday, and then get right back into it and then head back out to Des Moines next weekend.
So I have a question that I don't know that you can answer. You might be able to, but was there a player that you reached out to and thought that you had them to become a Pirate that you ultimately didn't end up getting and that you'd wish you did?
Oh, that's a hell of a question. That's a great question. Actually, there's a lot of guys, to be honest with you. I mean, shit, there's a lot of guys,
Mhm.
but at the same time, it kind of works out the way it works out. I'm trying to think of stories that, uh, it's actually crazy. I mean, I did have a conversation. It was very short, but I did have a conversation with Vince Young
Oh
going
wow.
into our first ever season.
Hmm.
I mean, the conversation didn't really, come out too much. It didn't. It was a short conversation, but that certainly would have been pretty interesting to have that kind of move for the franchise, and you know, but yeah, I mean, there's been a lot of guys that we kind of wish we got our hands on, but a lot of the time, they get opportunities, in the UFL, the NFL, the CFL, and they stick, and
Hmm.
so that's kind of what it is. But there's been a lot of guys, but my main focus is the guys that are here, and that's kind of where my head is at the moment. So
I got you. Yeah, I mean that obviously even just a conversation, with somebody or whatever is exciting. I'm sure from your end, and seeing like, oh man, really wish you could have this person. Really, that's got to be like I said. My GM experience has to do with Madden and everything else like that. So I mean, that's a lot easier.
yeah,
But
I mean, we've talked to a lot of. I mean, we've talked to a lot of high profile athletes, and
yeah,
I mean, some come through, some haven't,
yeah.
but. Yeah, I mean we've done pretty well up to this point, and so I mean we're happy with the guys that we've been able to bring in and guys that have produced for us over the years. So not too many complaints from that standpoint, but we definitely got some work ahead of us now, and that's really where our focus is. So
All right. Well, I thank you very much for your time, and I wish you all the best for the rest of the season. I'd love to talk to you again and have you on when you're ultimately in the playoffs and making your run. So hopefully we can connect again and do this all over.
absolutely, my pleasure. Anytime, I'm happy to come on whenever, and I certainly appreciate the time, certainly appreciate the support, and I wish you guys all the best. Look forward to reconnecting. All right.
All right. I appreciate it. Thank you very much, sir.
Yes, sir. You take care now. All righty.
This episode is brought to you by the Massachusetts Pirates of the Indoor Football League. Looking for a family friendly night out that's anything but boring? Experience the high octane action of indoor football, where every seat makes you part of the game. With tickets starting as low as $18, even front row seats are affordable. Be a part of the excitement. If a game ball lands your way, you get to keep it. How cool is that? And then after the final whistle, stick around for an autograph session with the players for just $15. Don't miss out. This is football like you've never experienced before. Come see the game in the Songus Arena in Lowell, Massachusetts. And for ticket information, go to www.masspiratesfootball.com. Again, that's masspiratesfootball.com. And a massive thank you to the Massachusetts Pirates owner, founder, general manager, Jawad Yatim, for coming on with us today. Excellent to get his insight of what it's like to not only start a team, but to continue to run it day to day, have to deal with the player personnel, who's coming in, who's leaving, and just overall what the thought process is day to day behind the scenes. Those are the things that I think are really, really cool about sports, is that it's not just the players that it's on the field. It's a lot of other moving parts behind it that probably a lot of us don't think about. We get to shift gears a little bit here now, and we're going to look at some local news. The Boston Bruins have hired Mao Sturm as their 30th head coach in Bruins history. The Bruins announced Thursday that they've hired Mao Sturm, a move that means that every NHL team now has a bench boss in place for next season. So they were the last team to hire, and I'm going to get into a little rant before I go into, how this kind of came to be and what to expect from this. The media, or the sports media in Boston, and I grew up on sports talk radio and everything else like that, and I love it. I will always love it, whether I disagree or not. That's the beauty of this media, is that you are allowed to disagree. You're allowed to voice that opinion. You're allowed to do all those different things. You can come with whatever numbers you want. There are some people in that sports talk show that have looked at this and gone, they were the last team to hire somebody. He must be the bottom of the barrel. He must be this. I don't care about the hiring. And those people will know who they are. Most of you will know who it is. I'm not necessarily focused on one person. My friends who listen to this are going to know that I had mentioned it with one person, but there's more. We got to stop. We got, I understand having to go into things, especially with the way the Bruins played last year and the way things kind of shake out with the front office they have in place and everything else like that. But this is getting a little ridiculous, of where we're just already, hey, let's just move on from this person already. Oh, he's gonna be done in 2 years anyway when Sweeney's contract's up, because they gave their GM Don Sweeney a 2-year extension because, as Dave mentioned in a previous episode, it looks like they were just, hey, no coach wanted to come in here on a lame duck year with a GM, which makes sense, because if the GM goes, typically the coach they hired goes with them. So now you have Sweeney for a couple of years more, and he may not have made the best moves any of recently. Their drafts have sucked and everything else. But Mao Sturm is the leading German player in the NHL for games played. He's second only to Leon Draisaitl in points in the NHL as a German player. He's led the German national team to a silver medal in the 2018 Olympic Games, which is not a small feat because Germany hasn't been in a gold medal game since 1976. He then became an assistant for the Los Angeles Kings for 3 years. Kings have been up and down in those time frames, but he was a very well-respected assistant coach. He was named the head coach of the Ontario Reign, where he led them to the playoffs every season as their head coach. They had 43 wins last season, which is the most they've had under Sturm. They were eliminated in the first round, which is, a little bit of one of those can he coach in the playoff things, and especially at the AHL. I have a lot of people that are around here that said they needed to go a little bit different. Now, they bring in a familiar face, fine. You want somebody that you've worked with before, talked with before, had interactions with. I totally understand that. He doesn't necessarily have the pedigree of an NHL coach, but we've seen it across all sports. First-time head coaches can have success. There's going to be some growing pains. The Bruins have a little over 26 million in cap space, according to Puckpedia, which is enough to put together a few people in place. Now, they have one or two guys that I think they need to re-sign. We've gone over this before in previous episodes as well. But there is outside of David Pastrnak, you need another goal scorer. You need a true proven goal scorer. You need defense. And some of the guys that you brought in at the trade deadline, which were all moves that we all agreed that needed to happen, didn't look great at the end of the season. Now, whether or not that's because the team just sucked in general or because they're not the right pieces. They have a top 10 draft pick. They have picks to get some talent back in that minor league system that you need. And Mao Sturm is a respected coach with young players, which is what you need. You need to be able to go out and find those players. Now, going out and finding a Connor McDavid or a Leon Draisaitl or any top talent like that in the league is very difficult to do. You don't really have that pick for it. You don't have the number one pick. But you need to develop as well. You need players to figure all that out. And they just haven't been able to do it as of recently. So they have the pieces. And when we talked about this earlier, why a coach would want to come here is because they have the ability to be back in the playoffs next year. It's not there's a couple of steps to get there, but they're not hard. The only problem is everybody in the league is trying to accomplish it. So it makes it hard on yourself when the players that you may want go other places or don't want to come here or whatever the case may be. But to go back to that media aspect of it, to discount that this is a original six team, that people don't care about that anymore, I don't think that's true. I think that still holds a little bit of weight. I don't think it holds a ton of weight, but I think it holds some. And you got a guy you're familiar with. You got a guy that's good with young talent. You got a guy that is going to be here, has had success where he's gone, whether it be an Olympic team, an assistant coach for the Los Angeles Kings, or their AHL affiliate. There's going to be some new stuff coming in that you've kind of put forth. The Kings this year won the first two games against the Oilers and then lost 4 straight. So they had a little. They were in the postseason this year. They won 48 games. For the 3 years that he was there, they had, like I said, relative success. You needed something different. You needed to bring in somebody that wasn't necessarily a coach and had run certain systems before and had done all these different things. You needed somebody young that had newer ideas, and I think they got that. I think he's going to be pretty good. The hope is that he's going to be pretty good. But I think it was a good hire. I think it's time will tell, obviously, as most things are in sports. I think you got to get behind him. If you're going to work in this market, we got to stop with the he's already a failure. He's already done. He's already done for. We got to give him the benefit of the doubt. And that goes for every market, really. Boston and New York, LA, and a few other markets, Chicago, I would say as well. We tend to do this a lot. We tend to look at something and go, well, this is crap to begin with. I don't want to think that way anymore. I want to hope that these moves make sense. The thing that drives me nuts more than anything else is the fact that the Bruins have gotten rid of at least the last 2 coaches. Were pretty good. And they decided to move on quickly. That's a front office thing. We've mentioned it up and down. We've talked about it every which way. They've made mistakes with getting rid of good coaches. So now, does this become the new guy with the new ideas and he's going to be here for a while? Or are we looking at, hey, 2 years, Sweeney's gone, he's gone, new GM comes in and hires their own guy? That's the worst case scenario because you're rebuilding then resets. You have pieces in place. You have players that underperformed last year that I believe they're going to play better this year. So let's figure it out. Get him the pieces that he needs. Put his system in place. Work with your youngsters. Develop. That's where you're at as a Bruins team. You have the veterans here. You have Pastrnak. You have Nikita Zadorov. You have Jeremy Swayman. You have Morgan Geekie if you can re-sign him. You have these players that are you're playing well. You just got to filter in. You got to find the guys that can filter into those spots that you haven't been able to find. And then you use them as trading pieces or you get them traded back to you. That's kind of what's happened. So I think it's a good hire. I don't care that he was the last coach hired. I don't care. I think they had identified him as a guy on their list early on. Were there other people? I'm sure. Maybe there were other people that said no or went somewhere else. But I think they had identified Mao Sturm as that guy and had him on the list pretty early on. So, again, welcome back, Mao Sturm. He's already had time to make a Dunkin' Donuts TikTok, so, things are going well. A little bit of baseball news. We talked about the torpedo bats early on and how they were they legal, were they illegal, were they this, were they that. It brought some excitement back to the game for like 2 weeks. And now it's nobody cares anymore. Now it seems that there's a new base running technique. And that base running technique is people are no longer sliding into second base. They're just running right through, even if they're going to be out. They have discovered that if you slide, you slow yourself down. And if you just keep running, you're going to get there quicker. And somebody has figured this out after many, many years of you always slide in the second base, try to break up a double play, which is now you can't slide into the player anymore and everything else. So now people have discovered that if you just run right through the bag, you're upright, you may be able to block somebody, you get to the second base quicker, you do all these different things to help prevent double plays and everything else. It's an interesting twist on a game that has been basically the same up until they put in the pitch clock and everything else like that a few years ago. You know, baseball obviously has been around for hundreds of years, America's pastime, all that fun stuff. Now we're starting to see these little things. You know, you had a shift for a while, that's now you can't do that shift anymore. It's all these little things that seem to be interesting. I highly recommend trying to go find, you know, there's TikTok videos, there's everything else like that of how teams have discovered, hey, you know, just don't slide anymore. Probably going to save people from getting hurt. The other caveat to this play is if a base runner is on third base and coming home and you're being forced out at second base, if you run past the base, you're no longer a force out. You can now go into a rundown, and if that run scores before you're tagged out, that run counts. So now teams are finding ways to score runs without stranding people. And again, another interesting kind of look at things. Hey, why didn't anybody think of this how many years ago? Because it just wasn't done that way, and nobody questioned it. Now you have people in place who are questioning, hey, can we make a bat like this? Hey, can we do this a little differently and score an extra run here or there when we have the runners in that position at third base or whatnot? Even if they're coming from second and there's a rundown and they get to get to home plate before the tag out, it still counts. So now these questions are coming into place for a sport that has been around forever, and it's changing how teams are planning, training, adjusting, all those things. You're not seeing the same product anymore. And I have a feeling this is going to continue to happen over the next few years, where there's going to be a little bit of change here or there that's going to change how teams practice, how they teach this, how everything else. It's the NBA. Hey, we're no longer a shoot all the twos, get the ball inside. You're looking for dunks, easy jump shots, layups. You're now looking for ways to get people open to shoot threes. And how do you get a higher shooting percentage? How do you get more opportunities per game? You're not wasting a shot clock. You're doing all that stuff. So the sports evolution has really taken off, I'd say probably over the last 3 years. Baseball-wise, basketball-wise. Basketball, more of 10 years ago, is kind of when Steph Curry kind of came into the league, maybe a little bit longer. But this evolution of kind of sport is changing before our eyes, which is very cool to see. Because if you sit down and you've watched sports, and as much sports as I have throughout my life, I mean, it was the same product. Yes, there would be pieces that would come in and out of the game that would change different ways of things. Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant, LeBron James, Tom Brady, Peyton Manning, Connor McDavid now for the NHL, Draisaitl, Alexander Ovechkin, back, now 20 years or so now for him. But to see these games still evolve for all these things and not change so much that we're not talking about the same game. Like, when records get broken and stuff like that now, NFL-wise, there's an extra game. So now they have an extra opportunity to put up more numbers. Numbers and records are going to fall because there's more opportunity for that. They're already thinking about putting an 18th game in there. It's very cool to see. It's difficult to look back at the old school 1950s, 60s, 70s NBA and go, yeah, they could compete now. but there's records that are being broken because it's not the same game anymore. Baseball had relatively stayed the same for a long time, and now we're starting to see a little bit more where there's going to be more RBIs because that's still going to count as a run now that they've figured out this new loophole. There's all these different things in the NFL where it's now a passing league. Running backs aren't as decent. Then Saquon Barkley has the year he has last year. All right, do running backs now still have value in this league? The evolution of all this and what they're going to come up with and what changes can be made is pretty cool. So if you're a sports fan, I highly recommend taking a look at all these kind of new little caveats within these games, because it's probably not the same game that you grew up on or not the same game that you fell in love with. Everything's a little bit different. There's a little wrinkle here, there's a little wrinkle there, and it has the ability to change what the game is and how you strategize and how you have to, how you have to practice against it, how you have to combat it. What do you do? So, again, very cool kind of new things that are coming into place and everything else like that. So, I had touched upon coaches and what they have to do to keep their job. I also mentioned in the wonderful world of football/soccer, depending on where you're from, coaches always never seem to keep their jobs if they don't either win a league or win a European championship or whatever. Those big teams always seem to get rid of them. There's a team over in London, Tottenham Hotspur, called Spurs, for those of you who don't know. I'm not a fan of that club. And I'm a West Ham United fan, and both clubs are in London, and they're rivals of sorts. Spurs have had more success as of recently in the league, I will say, because they had a guy named Gareth Bale, were able to sell him for a ton of money to Real Madrid, and they were able to go out and find some good players. And they've done well in the league to put themselves in Champions Leagues and everything else like that. Didn't win. They haven't won a trophy in quite a long time. They hired a manager a couple of years ago, Angelos Ainge. I'm going to see if I can do this. Now, I'm Greek, and I'm going to get this wrong, and I'm going to apologize for that ahead of time. But Ainge Postecoglou. Let's see how well I did.
Ange Postecoglou.
All right, I was a little off there. That's okay. Anyway, Ainge, if you will, came over from Celtic in the Scottish League and has been here since 2023. This year, Tottenham finished 17th in the Premier League, which is one spot away from being relegated, which, for those of you who don't know, in the Premier League, in English football, 20th, 19th, and 18th, if your club finishes in those three spots, you get relegated to the league below. Players' salaries get halved. Players are going to have to move. They're going to get released. So there's a whole bunch of significance to this. You're not going to get as much TV money. It's going to cost your team millions upon millions of dollars. I'm going to look up really quick how much you make just in TV rights deals going from the Championship to the Premier League in English football. For a team playing in the playoff final, so again, first and second place of the Championship get moved up automatically to the Premier League. Third, fourth, fifth, and sixth play in a 4-team playoff, and whoever wins of those 4-team playoff gets a promotion as well. So in theory, the first, second, and sixth team in the Championship last year could move up to the Premier League. It is estimated that between 140 and 300 million pounds is what teams make from moving from that Championship to the Premier League. That's roughly, so if we base it on 140 million pounds, it's almost $160 million that the team will get with TV rights and everything else they get. So a good influx of money. And the problem with that is that if that team goes up and comes right back down, you've spent a ton of money to find Premier League talent, to go out and find new players and stuff like that. If you get sent right back down, there's a chance that you're going to get relegated from the championship down to League One. And I know that's all confusing. The second league is called the championship, and then League One is actually the third. I get all that. I digress, and we'll get into that some other day. But because you're spending so much money, and then you have to take probably a loss on a lot of the players that you just went out and got, you're going to be out of a lot of money, and you're going to not make anywhere near as much, and there's a chance that you go back down. There's teams that have been in the Premier League a couple of years ago that are now going to League One. With all that said, I've diverted a little bit off course. Tottenham Hotspur did not get relegated this year. They came in the place just above that, which is not good, especially for as much money as they're spending on their squad. Not good. Totally understand that that is not where they want to be. However, Tottenham Hotspur this year won the Europa League, which is a European competition. They beat Manchester United, another English team. And it was the first time in 17 years that they've won a trophy. It has been a meme for anybody in the soccer community that knows. It has been a meme that Spurs have not won a trophy in a long time. And it's one of those things that I was disappointed to see end, because I love the meme. I love that they're a rival of West Ham, and West Ham had won a European championship prior to Spurs winning it. Got to rub that in their face a little bit. All those fun things. So not only did this boss, now he domestically in the league, he had a horrific year. The year before, the team finished in 5th place in the Premier League. So more along the lines of where they had kind of been. When they parted ways with their last coach, Antonio Conte, Ainge came in, was appointed the manager in June, led us the rest of the season, 8 wins, 2 draws from our first 10 matches, securing Premier League Manager of the Month award for the first 3 months of 23 and 24. So he came in and had a lot of success. He had a lot of success last year, finishing 5th place. This year just didn't work out that well in the Premier League. Still in the Premier League. West Ham actually finished above Spurs and Manchester United. Not by much, but they did. So he won this championship in Europe. A lot of celebration. European trophy for the trophy case for the first time in a long time. And he was fired. There are some names that are out there for Tottenham that make some sense. Thomas Frank is the manager of Brentford in the Premier League. Olivier Glasner from Crystal Palace. Marco Silva from Fulham. All teams that have overachieved for where they kind of stand comparative to the bigger teams and everything else. Mauricio Pochettino, who is the manager of the United States national team. Now, Pochettino was a Tottenham head coach at one point in time. So that would be interesting. I don't think that one's going to happen. So for anybody that's a United States national team fan, I don't think he's going to go anywhere. Former England boss Gareth Southgate is unattached and doesn't have a contract with anyone. Maybe somebody that Tottenham would look at. But my point to all of this rambling is simple. At what point do we give people a chance to have a poor showing one year? At what point do we allow a down year? As I've mentioned before, I understand sports franchises, no matter where you are in the world, are big money, and owners spend a lot of time. The owner of Tottenham is Daniel Levy, and he's known for firing managers for not living up to his expectations just for the league and everything else. trophies and runs and different things and different whatever, he doesn't seem to care. And I'm sure that's not true. But perception is reality. And I'm not going to harp on just this one thing, as I've done over the past probably 10 minutes of this podcast. But you're putting people in places to do these things, win these things, put your franchises in this. Let's look at the Knicks. The Knicks did it with Tom Thibodeau, as mentioned before, which a report came out today that Jay Wright is probably not interested in that job. But we can't have coaches have a one-off year. And I think that's tough. Because once you do this thing where you change a coach and you express that we need to be at this level and this is where we have to be, that's when pressure starts to build. New systems getting put in place. Players have to learn them. Yes, they're professionals. Yes, they get paid a lot of money. They should be able to learn all this stuff. The great ones will. Not everybody will get along. Not everybody will fit in the system. So now this coach has to go out and find players to fit the system. They got to spend more money. And this is where teams fall into a spot of rebuilding for 20 years. And I'm not saying that's what's going to happen to Tottenham. I'm not saying that's what's going to happen to the Knicks. I'm not saying that's what's going to happen to any one of these teams that make these types of moves. But these are where these mistakes come. And yes, you have to identify early on for all of the things behind the scenes that we couldn't possibly know. Do the coach and the GM not get along? Denver Nuggets type situation. Does the GM have bringing in personnel that the coach doesn't want? Does the coach not have the respect of the locker room? All these things in between. At some point in time, you have to let results happen and go, okay, how do we fix this? And this is your time frame to do it. Everybody wants to win. Everybody wants to be the champion every year, no matter what sport you're in. At some point in time, you have to understand there are going to be things that are going to happen based upon bad contracts and previous management, players' development being stunted because you have a new system in place, having players that don't agree with your coach, having the coach have things happen in their personal life, all of one of 100 different things that can affect a season. These things happen. Some point, is there anybody that's going to give somebody a legitimate shot at continuing the coach even after a bad season? This one won a trophy that your club desperately needed or desperately wanted, and yet he still got fired. Obviously, with me sitting here in front of a microphone and explaining this to you, I have no say in any of this, but I've always been a coach type sports fan, that if a coach is there and they struggle, all right, give them a chance to fix it. It may just be one more extra season, and I think that's fine. If you go, hey, you need to fix this, you're at 17th in the Premier League, yes, you won us a trophy, thank you so much. I mean, West Ham did this similar thing with David Moyes. David Moyes came in, has been successful, had done all these different things with the club. I hated his style of how his teams played, but it was effective. And I really struggled as a fan, and they won a European trophy, and I was ecstatic. I never thought I would see it in my lifetime, let alone a few years ago. And they had to make some moves. They had to do some things with Declan Rice, who's gone on to Arsenal and is a English international and a phenomenal player, and I wish he was still a West Ham player. But after that season, they moved on from him, and they hired a manager that was not in the right place, lasted about 9 months. Now we're on to Graham Potter, who has struggled the rest of last year, but let's give him some time, build the team that he wants in the system that he wants. We've seen flashes of how good they can play, but it's tough to make those decisions. I believe David Moyes' contract just ran out, and they decided not to renew it. Different from firing. That's not retaining. Same premise. It's difficult when you want to be more successful than you are. Eventually, a common denominator comes in where you're not where you want to be, and that's ownership. And I fully believe that's West Ham's problem. And as much as I would love to interview all of West Ham and everything else like that, that's just my opinion. The management has also saved this club from the crushing debt they were in at one point in time and everything else. So I have to be grateful for that. Tottenham are now in that kind of limelight of, is Daniel Levy the problem over there? Is he too quick to fire people? Is he too quick to do all these different things? They've gone through quite a few managers over the last few years. I'll try to see kind of how many they've gone through with Daniel Levy taking over. But, it's just one of those things that's like, there has to be a point where you point at somebody and go, that's the problem. We've seen this all. We have to know that this is the problem. Daniel Levy took over in 2001. They've gone through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17 managers in that time frame. So 24 years, 17 managers. And that's including the interims and assistants that had to take over, or acting, caretaker, whatever you want to call them. Those were, so the 17 different managers. It's hard to have any continuity and have any sort of success when you're constantly changing your leadership. Same thing goes with the Knicks. You're in a spot. There are a lot of fans that called for this, so a little bit different. But I'm supporting coaches that are not getting a legitimate shot anymore, or not be given the opportunity to continue to keep winning or continue or fix a problem. To me, if I was an owner, and again, the outside looking in, if I'm an owner, I'm looking at it and I'm going, all right, you got a year to fix this. We can't finish below 10th in the Premier League. We're obviously going to be in Europe again next year with winning the championship or winning that European title. We're going to be playing in Europe again. You got to finish better than this. I got to see the improvement in the league, because we can't hover around the bottom even if we win trophies. We can't hover around the bottom. So that's me. With that said, it's difficult, and coaches get hired to get fired. You rarely get to leave on your own terms. I've done my ranting and raving for the coaches. I've done my ranting and raving for all of the other aspects that we went through. Very grateful for Jawad Yatim to come on. Very grateful for the Massachusetts Pirates. They got a big win last night. So playoff pushes in full effect for the Massachusetts Pirates. So give them a check out. Remember, we still have tickets. I've made a post on Facebook. I've made a post on X. And I'm going to put one up on TikTok and everything else like that. We have tickets that we're going to raffle away, or we're going to give away. There's a couple people entered. So look for those posts. We'll put it up on the website as well. What you have to do, you're going to have to go on to Facebook, share the post, like it, and then it's either that or you have to go to our website and buy one piece of merch. That's it. Just one piece of merchandise, and then you're entered to win 4 tickets in Section 118 at the home game, the last home game of the year for the Massachusetts Pirates. So we're going to be doing that. So please keep an eye out for that. That's everything I got for you today. We'll see you with another episode coming out shortly after this one, which will be with the Granite State Destroyers again, and everybody's favorite Marine and Dickey back with us. So we'll talk with them, get that episode out. Everybody, have a good morning, good evening, good night, wherever you are, and we'll see you on that next episode.